This presentation is to instruct staff on the proper completion of 2-week time studies for PCA billing. What is a time study? A time study is a health document that logs minutes related to personal care assistant or PCA services for a student. The time study is completed to create an average number of daily minutes for billing purposes. A student's eligibility for services is dependent on their age and their medical needs. They must be a dependent and require assistance with one or more activities of daily living. These will be discussed in further slides. A student may also receive services if they require intervention or redirection related to Level 1 behaviors that are directly linked to their medical disability. This will also be covered later in the presentation. Students who receive PCA services require assistance with certain activities called Activities of Daily Living, or ADLs, in order to attend school and receive a free appropriate public education, or FAPE, just as other children without disabilities do. PCA minutes are only counted towards frequent actions that are directly related to a student's health and safety, and assistance on these activities must be medically necessary in order for minutes to be counted. The scope of PCA services includes 4 types of possible assistance that you may be providing for a student. These types of assistance include assist. This is providing hands-on assistance with a daily living task, such as providing physical support to a student as they transfer in and out of a wheelchair, actively providing personal care like hand washing, or preparing food for a student's lunch. Cue. This is reminding students to complete ADL tasks or standing by and providing a physical, visual, or verbal prompt to direct a student to complete an ADL task. An example of this might be reminding a student to put on their coat and gloves to go outside if the student would not otherwise know to do that, or prompting a student to complete dressing tasks after toileting, such as tucking in a shirt or zipping a zipper. Observe and intervene or redirect. This service pertains specifically to behavior. Staff who do this identify and de-escalate episodes of student behavior related to the student's medical disability. The behaviors must be an already documented and identified problem in order for these minutes to be billed to PCA services. We will cover this in more detail at the end of the presentation. Finally, monitor. This is defined as monitoring a student's health and performing other health-related procedures and tasks as assigned by the licensed school nurse or other qualified professional. These may include tasks such as seizure intervention for a student who has seizures more than 2 times per week. The first ADL we will discuss is toileting. Toileting is all tasks related to bowel and bladder care, such as transfers, mobility, and positioning related to toileting, such as walking a student to the bathroom and assisting them in positioning on the toilet. It also includes feminine hygiene, cleansing, and other tasks related to elimination, such as arranging clothing following bathroom use. Feeding and meal preparation are the next 2 ADLs we will discuss. Feeding includes things such as transfers, mobility, and positioning related to feeding, such as getting situated at the lunch table, hand washing, eating and drinking, cleaning up after the meals, and other tasks related to meal times. Meal preparation includes cutting or pureeing food and heating food up for a student. Grooming and bathing are the next ADLs we will discuss. Grooming includes combing and brushing of hair, nail care, oral care, the blowing and wiping of noses, and eyeglass and hearing aid care and assisting students with those tasks. Other more social grooming activities, such as braiding hair or painting fingernails, do not count towards PCA minutes, as these activities are not medically necessary. It is unlikely and often inappropriate that we would do these activities in a school setting anyway, but this is just for your reference. The bathing activities we will do at school include the washing of hands and face separate from meal times. We do not do other bathing activities in the school setting. In a group home, this would be different. Dressing is the next ADL. This includes assistance with dressing and undressing, the application of TED hose, orthotics, and prosthetics, preparing students for outdoor time, and coming from or going to transportation. For example, you may help a student off with his coat in the morning after he gets off the bus, if he cannot take his coat off by himself. Mobility is our next ADL. Mobility is physically assisting a student or moving a student from one place to another, such as a student that uses a walker or is in a wheelchair. Mobility applies both within the classroom and within the larger building. This may look like a physical or standby assist with a student using a walker, or assisting or monitoring a student moving his or her own wheelchair safely. Transferring and positioning are two other ADLs. Transferring includes physically lifting or assisting a student with a move from one place to another. For example, from a wheelchair to a changing table or from the floor to a chair. Positioning is to help a student compensate for poor muscle or motor control. This is helping a student obtain the correct position in a piece of equipment, repositioning them in their current piece of equipment, or assisting the student to maintain a free standing or sitting position. This is a reminder not to double dip billing. Especially with these activities as well as mobility, make sure that you only count these minutes to one ADL area. For example, transferring that's related to toileting is billed only to toileting and not also to transferring as a separate category. The final non-behavioral ADL we will discuss is other health-related procedures and tasks. These are tasks that have been delegated to you by a licensed health professional. Training is typically required for these tasks. They may include things such as assisting a student with self-administered medication, range of motion, tracheostomy and GT feeding, or seizure intervention for students who have seizures more than 2 times a week. Now we'll move along to redirection and monitoring of behavior. Minutes spent redirecting and monitoring behavior also count towards PCA minutes, but they have some specific guidelines. PCA billing is done only for Level 1 behaviors. To be considered a Level 1 behavior, the behavior must be self-injurious, injurious to others, staff or students, or destructive to property. Minutes spent redirecting and monitoring the student for those Level 1 behaviors generally count. However, the behaviors must also be related to the student's medical diagnosis and relate back to the medical need of that student. The behaviors must also occur at least 4 times a week. If you are trying to determine whether or not a behavior is considered Level 1, some good questions to ask yourself are whether or not the student would be prevented from attending school due to their behaviors, or whether the behavior puts the student, another person, or property in harm's way beyond what is expected for the child's age. If the answer to these questions is yes, then the behavior is likely considered a Level 1 behavior. These behaviors must occur at least 4 times a week, as we said earlier, in order to be considered billable minutes. Off-task or work avoidance behaviors during academic time, such as calling out, not listening, walking away, grabbing others' property, or general disruption of class, are not billed. Even if you are a classroom paraprofessional acting as a PCA for parts of a student's day, those behaviors are the responsibility of the teacher, yourself, and the other paraprofessionals to handle in your role as an educational professional. A student may be exhibiting these off-task behaviors during class time and then suddenly begin demonstrating a separate Level 1 behavior that is billable as part of one longer behavioral episode. Staff must determine the starting point at which the Level 1 behavior began and count minutes for the time study, beginning at that time only.
Here are some examples of Level 1 behavior. Behaviors that are self-injurious include hitting, biting oneself, headbanging, burning oneself, self-poking or stabbing, ingesting foreign substances or pica, pulling out hair, and suicide threats. Behaviors that are injurious to others may include hitting, biting, pinching, scratching, kicking, pulling hair, or spitting. Behaviors that are destructive to property might include breaking windows, lamps, or furniture, tearing clothes, setting fires, using tools or objects to damage property, or throwing furniture. Please note that Level 1 behaviors must occur at least 4 times per week in order to be counted. If a student exhibits headbanging only 1 time per week, minutes spent redirecting that behavior do not count. However, if the student hits peers once or twice per day, for a total of 5 to 10 times weekly, these minutes would be counted each time the behavior occurs. Any combination of Level 1 behaviors that occur 4 times per week or more count as minutes toward the time study. So if a student scratches staff 2 times, pulls their own hair once, and rips their own shirt once, for a total of 4 Level 1 behaviors that week, minutes spent redirecting those behaviors would all be considered billable. As we noted earlier, in order to bill for minutes spent monitoring for behavior, a student's behaviors must already be known and the triggers identified. For example, if a student's behavior plan notes that he engages in hitting and other aggressive behaviors due to sensory concerns related to his autism diagnosis, and a known trigger for him is loud or unexpected noise, a staff member could begin tracking monitoring minutes, moving over and staying near the student if a classmate screams loudly. The staff member would then redirect the student's behavior if necessary, and then stop tracking minutes once the behavior is over or the trigger has been removed. As another example, billing can also occur for students who display increased vulnerability due to cognitive deficits or socially inappropriate behaviors. A student who is demonstrating episodes of elopement behaviors or running away would have billable minutes for PCA observation and monitoring during hallway transitions, lunch, recess, and other times of movement in which the child is likely to elope and make herself unsafe. However, once the child is safely inside the classroom, these monitoring minutes are considered to be a part of the teacher's and/or a classroom paraprofessional's duty, and so are no longer billed. However, please note that the student must qualify for PCA services due to other injurious behaviors or ADL deficits. Elopement alone is not considered an injurious behavior, and so cannot qualify a student for PCA services. Now that you are familiar with the activities that count towards PCA minutes, you can begin to complete the time study form. The top of the form will be completed by the school health professional, or can be completed by any person who is working on this form for the student. In the next section, list all staff who will provide assistance with ADLs, no matter how long they work with the student throughout the day, even if it is only for half an hour, etc., and have them sign and initial next to their name. As soon as you've been notified by the case manager and/or the PCA supervisor, identify the 10 school days, ideally consecutive days, in which you will be completing the time study. On the first morning of the time study, take the time study 3-ring binder along with a pencil or pen. This binder should pass from staff member to staff member throughout the student's day, to whomever is directly providing service to the student at a given time. Track the number of minutes for each billable activity and complete the form as you go throughout your day. When filling out the form, minutes for each activity should be noted in the correct column. Round times to the nearest 5 minutes, unless an activity is extremely short, less than 1 or 2 minutes, such as positioning a student or redirecting a behavior. In these cases, make a tally mark in the appropriate column for each time that the activity is required. Initial in the box for each activity that you are responsible for. If assistance is required more than once per day for an activity such as toileting, put that time on the next line with the appropriate person's initials. Initial in the box below any section with tally marks if there is not enough room. Each person who puts a tally mark should initial in that box. The comment section is for any notes you have regarding the student's needs, and the number in group is usually 1. At the end of the day, add up the total number of minutes for the day in all the boxes and convert to an hour and minutes format. For convenience and ease of interpreting data, darken the line below that day's recorded data. 2 reminders. Please make sure all noted times have initials next to them. And please make sure all ADL activities throughout the day are listed on separate lines. If a student requires toileting 3 times a day, please list these on 3 separate lines. There are 2 additional pages for data recording, so that all 10 days can be recorded. If the student is absent for a day, simply skip that day and begin recording again on the day the student returns. For example, if a student has 5 days of data collected and then misses 2 days of school, the day they return will count as day 6 for the purposes of the time study. There are also descriptions of the ADLs available on the back of the time study sheets for your reference. If you have any questions, please contact your licensed school nurse or qualified health professional. Thank you very much for your time today. Have a great day.